If you're looking for the best TV money can buy without totally smashing the piggy bank, definitely pay attention to the 2025 Samsung S90F QD OLED TV, coming in with a similar panel technology to the much more expensive S95F, but at a much lower price and sporting a glossy coating for all of you home theater enthusiasts out there who want the clearest picture possible. At least on paper, this thing could be one of the best displays that money can buy this year, but like every display, it's not perfect. So let's take a look at this 65-inch model that was lent to me by Samsung to see if it's the right choice for you. Now, real quick, in terms of the specs, this is a 4K 144 Hz plus VRR QD OLED panel that is going to be either, I believe, version 3 or 4. Couldn't nail down an answer. It comes with their brand new NQ4 AI Gen 3 processor. It supports HDR 10, 10 Plus, and HLG, but unfortunately no Dolby Vision. And the model I'll be reviewing today is the 65-inch version, which comes in, at least right now, at $2,499.99, which is actually very competitive already, but I do suspect it will drop massively in terms of price throughout the year. So definitely go ahead and check out my affiliate links in the description below if you're interested to see what the current price is. Now, it does also come with a 1-year labor in parts warranty, and in terms of the ports, pause if you need to, but the best feature here is definitely that it comes with 4 full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 ports, making it an excellent option for both watching movies as well as gaming on consoles and PCs. So on paper, this thing is looking amazing, but what about the actual picture quality? And if you've never used a QD OLED before, let me just tell you that honestly, I still believe that a proper QD OLED with a glossy coating, it's hard to beat. The amount of color and brightness that you get out of these panels really does put traditional WOLEDs to shame. Now, LG's latest and greatest tech certainly does give it a run for its money, but the value being presented here, considering the crazy vibrance that leaps off the screen with a QD OLED, as well as the infinite contrast ratio and super fast response times that you can expect on all OLEDs, makes this just an incredible viewing experience. Now, for all you display enthusiasts, I'm going to go over my CalMan measurements to get the exact accuracy out of this display, but for everybody else, feel free to skip ahead to the TLDR. But starting off with the SDR performance out of the box, it's actually very good. Now, it's not perfect. It does have a bit too much red here, it seems, but after some simple adjustments, you can get a very accurate picture that also follows the EOTF curve well, which means there shouldn't be anything massively blown out, at least in the filmmaker mode. But in the PC game mode, well, things are definitely a bit different. Unfortunately, it doesn't follow the EOTF curve correctly. The white balance is off, and out of the box, it is going to be stretching colors massively, meaning it's just going to look all sorts of wrong. Now, thankfully, this can be fixed, and I'll have the best settings in my Patreon linked in the description below, which also gets you access to the Discord and is the best way to support my channel and allows you to ask me questions directly. Moving on to the SDR color accuracy after adjusting some settings, it's actually very solid. You can see here that it has an average delta E of 1.6, which is quite a bit better than I was expecting considering the price of this display. But now let's talk about the HDR, because this is where a lot of displays trip up. In filmmaker mode, once again, it does a very good job. It's not perfect, but it's about as close as you can expect out of a really good display. Now, in game mode, once again, there are major issues. It's gonna be blowing out highlights like crazy out of the box, and it also has far too much blue in the white balance, meaning everything's just gonna look a little bit too blue. It's gonna look way too high contrast, and you'll be missing a lot of detail in bright highlights. But again, that can be fixed. And in terms of the HDR color gamut, I got actually a very good, roughly 87% in UV for BT 2020, which should not only be far better than traditional WOLEDs, but this might actually even be better than the LG G5, which is LG's current flagship display in 2025. And in terms of the HDR color accuracy, it did all right, but it does have some visible inaccuracies, so you would probably want to calibrate it if you're going to use it for professional use. The short version, in terms of pop and vibrance in HDR content, QD OLED remains unmatched, and the S90F specifically really leaps off the screen when pushed to its limits. It looks great, delivers deep saturated HDR imagery, and has good gamma tracking in filmmaker mode, which is excellent for movie watching. However, in game mode, it has some significant inaccuracies that require major changes to fix, but it can be done. Now let's move on to the brightness and HDR impact. It's my favorite section, and the S90F this year brings a shockingly big upgrade in brightness over what I've seen on the S90D. In fact, in my testing, it seems like it should be somewhere around 30% higher in terms of that brightness, putting it on par with last year's much more expensive TVs such as the S95D and LG G4. If you take a look here at the window brightness measurements, you can see that the Samsung S90F does get 286 nits on a 100% window and 1553 in a 10% window. Now in real HDR content, if you take a look here, you can see the S90F gets actually around 435 nits on the terrain in a Baldur's Gate 3 scene, and it does get 1435 nits on a peak highlight in that same scene, which does put this, again, just behind the LG G4, and for the price, that is an excellent and very respectable result, especially considering the colors should be better than the LG G4, which means, assuming the accuracy is good, the S90F should look better overall than the LG G4. And considering how bright this gets, it could even be a good bright room TV if it didn't have some issues. Because yes, while the S90F does have over 8 million local dimming zones thanks to the infinite contrast ratio, which will lead to excellent accuracy in contrast, especially if you're looking at things like a star field, something that can't be replicated by mini LED, well, unfortunately, it still does suffer in terms of contrast in a bright room due to the inherent qualities of QD OLED. If you take a look here at some footage that I have, once you flip the lights on, you are going to lose a significant amount of contrast, and there's simply no getting around it. That does mean it can at times look a bit closer to like a mini LED or LCD based display than an OLED if you don't control your lighting, which makes this display really good in a light controlled home theater environment. But for a family room or room with lots of lighting or open windows, you may want to consider other alternatives if you want to get the best image quality and contrast out of the display at all times. Now, thankfully, in terms of the finish on this display, it is definitely excellent. To my delight, Samsung has chosen to not use a matte coating on this year's S90 models, which means you can expect improved sharpness and image depth versus the more expensive S95F. Now, on the one hand, some buyers may prefer the anti-reflective properties of the S95F screen, which leads to less distracting glare on said screen, but I believe the trade-offs of using a matte coating simply aren't worth it, as you do get far worse contrast, especially in a bright room, and many other issues such as worse clarity. Personally, I feel Samsung made the right call with a glossy coating on the S90F. In fact, if you take a look here at my zoomed in subpixel shot, you'll notice that it's incredibly clear, incredibly crisp, and this is a huge improvement over, again, the S95F. Now, unfortunately, as you might have noticed, the RGB subpixels are still in a triangular arrangement, which means that some text can have some fringing, such as green or red on the edges of it, and I'd like to see that improved, but it's unlikely to be a big issue for the vast majority of buyers. Now, in terms of its motion in 24p judder control, to me, this is definitely a very huge deal. I know some people want to see it directly as the original creators intended at 24 FPS, but a lot of movies in 24 FPS look very stuttery to me, and I do appreciate when TVs get it right. Now, while my S90F unit did do a good job of fixing 24p judder in tests, it did unfortunately have some issues with fast-moving, highly detailed scenes that can cause some artifacting. I was told by Samsung, at least on the S95F, and I believe for the S90F as well, this is a bug that they'll be fixing with a future firmware update. Now let's talk about the gaming performance. If you take a look here at 144 Hertz, you do get pretty clear motion. It's not perfect, it's a bit hard to read the text in motion, but when compared to the LCDs on the right, it's a massive improvement and certainly could be used for online competitive gaming when tracking fast-moving targets. In fact, even in terms of latency, you can see here that the S90F is incredibly good. At 28 milliseconds of total system latency, it's actually one of the fastest displays I have ever measured. If I were to buy a QD OLED display for PC gaming in 2025, honestly, this would likely be my first choice. Now, let's talk about the viewing angles and uniformity. Thankfully, viewing angles are one of QD OLED's biggest strengths, and this remains true for the S90F. No matter where you sit, it has near perfect image quality, making it ideal for large theater rooms. And as usual, my unit came with little to no issues, even on gray screens where many other OLEDs can show significant banding. If you're after the cleanest panel with the best viewing angles for a distraction-free viewing experience, regardless of where you're viewing the screen, the S90F is likely to be one of the best options on the market. And now let's talk about the audio. Look, the S90F's audio is pretty decent, but it's nothing to write home about. If you're interested in this TV, I'd recommend at least a nice soundbar or a full sound system to take full advantage of the display. The timbre and the clarity of the audio is pretty decent for a built-in solution. Definitely a step above a lot of other TVs I've heard, but it won't have the precision of more expensive alternatives. And now let's talk about the menu, firmware, and features. Now, many people say they love Tizen OS, and look, it's decent, but I do get frustrated with it occasionally. At times, it can randomly slow down when navigating the settings, and it forces you to sign in to use apps. And not only that, but I've had some bad experiences in the past with Samsung updating their software, and the TV has changed in ways that I did not like. Hopefully those days are over. Now, despite that, Tizen OS is packing a ton of features that many buyers will love, such as all their new AI features like live translate game bars, as well as the new AI frequently used settings, which is actually pretty useful, especially for testing. And of course, they have all their lifestyle features, which some people may like, and the Samsung TV Plus app. So, is the S90F the TV you've been waiting for? Probably yes. Don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect TV. I really wish it came with the higher 165 Hertz refresh rate and brightness of the S95F, and it's disappointing to see that Samsung's still nerfing the game mode brightness and accuracy, as yes, I did find that game mode was a little bit less bright overall than the filmmaker mode. And it's a shame that QD OLED still struggles with ambient light, but in a dark room, this TV might just be nearly unbeatable. It brings big improvements in almost all areas over the S90D, especially in HDR brightness, and with its clearer glossy coating, I actually think this TV overall looks better than the higher-end S95F. Now, keep in mind, the S95F is a much more expensive and much brighter TV than the S90F, and it's already a seriously impressive competitor in 2025. Believe me, this is high praise for the S90F. Ultimately, the S90F is one of the greatest displays ever created, and aside from its contrast problems in bright rooms and irregular subpixel arrangement, it's what I would consider to be a nearly perfect display. Considering its lower price as well as massive discounts that are likely to follow this year, I highly recommend the 2025 Samsung S90F QD OLED TV, and I'm going to give it a very, very high 9 out of 10. If you're looking to pick one up, check my affiliate links in the description below. I cannot say enough good things about this TV, and if I had a budget of around $2,000 plus or minus some to pick up an OLED, this would probably be the one.